Hey, hi, hello. So we're going to be doing something slightly more unhinged this time. Something between a seriously written video essay and off-the-cuff slop content. Also, we're going to do this new side angle to really sell how unhinged I've become. Well, things seem to be going pretty good right now, so in honor of that, let's rank political ideologies. Quick note before we start, I will not be addressing the infinitely fringe political parties people identify as on the internet these days. No MAGA communists or ANCAPs or NASBULs. I like to deal with the real world, or IRL, as I sit here talking in front of my single camera iPhone from 2016. What I'll be talking about are the same political ideologies that have dominated the discourse since the 20th century, but hopefully I can give you my own unique, fun twist to it. There will be three categories in which I will arbitrarily assign points based on how much each political ideology has based on its feel or vibes, and this number can change based on the day of the week or what mood I'm in, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. The first category will be how fascist each ideology is, followed by the amount of know-how each one has. So we're going to combine like intellectual smarts with handiness, basically, or use value. And then the final category will be how much riz each political ideology has. So let's get started, shall we? Centrist opportunists. These are the most apolitical people in the world, the Mr. Houses of like capitalism, if you will. The only thing centrist opportunists care about is the grift. They know the only way to avoid the downward spiral is through the endless proliferation of capital accumulation. Now, we already see some interesting overlap in this group because at one point in history, we could have called Elon Musk a CEO, but as of this recording, he clearly identifies as a MAGA Trump supporter, which is one of the categories featured here, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. A CEO can align with the political party, but only if they are guaranteed a payday as a result. WWE's current creative head, Paul Triple H Levesque, is another good example of a CEO. Horrifically mediocre personality, thinks like artificial intelligence, not a creative bone in his body, and cares only about making money. He's apolitical, but will voice his support of whatever political party is currently funding his company. Also, his mother-in-law is currently on the Board of Education. Centrists are pretty practical, but they're also pretty stupid. You know, those people who have a lot of common sense but can't seem to form an original thought? They don't have time for any highfalutin theory. They look down on stuff like that, probably because they don't have the time. Centrist opportunists are notoriously bad sleepers, no bedtime island for them, which means they aren't fun at parties. They are terrible at video games, but fortunately they can pay people to play video games for them so they can boast about how great they are at video games. If you ask me, boasting about how great you are at video games should automatically give that person the ick, whether or not they actually are good at video games, because who gives a shit? Fascism at a 10 because not only is seeking the endless proliferation of capital such a banal life goal to strive towards, but fascism simply loves to get in bed with big business before everything implodes around them and it's time to create a new forever enemy. It's an ideology where everybody loses, including you. I put someone like Andrew Tate in this category as well. As far as I know, he has never supported the policies of Trump, but so I can't call him a Trump supporter, but the misogyny usually comes with the territory. There are also centrists like James Rolfe, aka the angry video game nerd, who would just rather not get involved with politics, which is fine. These are the types of people who could come up with a pretty decent idea for a YouTube channel and then run it into the ground for 20 years by producing endlessly eye-wateringly vanilla content for their audience who are so overworked and bored that they'll just put it on as background noise as they sleep or work or both. Who knows why people do things? Logan Paul would probably qualify as a centrist opportunist as well, so don't trust a centrist because they do have politics. Being a misogynist or a transphobe is a political stance. What about Piers Morgan, Mr. Both Sides? Though he definitely has strong stats in the centrism, I'm going to have to go with libtard here. Now, a libtard is not necessarily a progressive liberal. A libtard can be a classical liberal, like a John Stuart Mill, or what I'll call a boomer over 50 liberal. Then there are the under 50 liberals who I qualify as more of as a progressive liberal. These are the types of people who will put a Ukrainian flag on their suburban lawn. And just for the record, having a lawn is fascist. Sorry, I don't make the rules. I have a lawn, but I don't always maintain it. Sometimes I go weeks without cutting it. I barely even edge. This means I have fascist tendencies. Fortunately for myself, I guess, I score low on the lower end because I only spend about an hour on average per week maintaining my lawn. Bonus points for fascism if you water your lawn every day, put chemicals on it to make the grass grow faster, and especially if you edge. Oh, and have a leaf blower you use at least 2 to 3 times per week. Pro tip, just let the leaves sit.
It's healthy for the grass.
Libtards aren't all that different from Trump supporters. They both unequivocally support Israel over Palestine, because who doesn't love supporting the perennial favorite evil empire? Libtards and their elitism gave way to the nightmare that is Donald Trump, but they are too smart or too elitist or too rich to even realize it, or maybe they simply don't care. Libtards have a lot of overlap with centrist opportunists because they too love to make money and will often value money over politics. Boomers over 50 who stand for Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton are great examples. People completely out of touch with reality, but will call you ageist when you call them out for it. Normalize ageism, people. I'm telling you, especially millennials. I love millennials. Hell, I am a millennial, but we gotta stop being bitches when it comes to avoiding confrontation with our boomer lib parents, because they will occasionally buy us off with stuff. Sounds like a transactional relationship to me. But let's talk about the under 50 liberals. You want a perfect example of an under 50 libtard? How about the dynamic duo of streamers Vosh and Destiny, a pair of autistic debate bros who have a severe lack of empathy but will always come prepared with their facts and logic.
Sound familiar?
Both love citing Wikipedia in their research, which, whatever, it's a fine resource. I use it myself, not judging. Vosh fancies himself a socialist, but really he's just a brunch-time liberal with a hefty dash of centrist opportunism embedded into his DNA, or maybe his Adderall prescription. These are the types who, say fair opportunity for all, equality, yada, 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 but also are able to do what they do for a living because their parents have a ton of money and they've actually don't actually have that much real world. And libtards of this ilk love to speak on behalf of black people in a patronizing fashion, or will just outright call them fascist and suggest they want an ethno-state when they're confronted with the unpleasant reality of white privilege.
See from black separatists, right? They aren't like, we should have a proportional amount of industry controlled by black people in X country and then let the cards fall where they may. There's usually an explicit intent to not live with the racial groups that are associated with their oppression.
So for the under 50 libtards, I'm feeling a strong 9 in the fascism department. They love telling people how wrong they are and how right they are. I give the boomer libs a 7, feeling a medium to strong 8 with the know-how on under 50s, and a low to medium 9 with the boomer tards, because maintaining a yard requires a severe amount of know-how. There is also a group of libtards sandwiched between the boomers and younger millennials like Vosh and Destiny, the blue sky libtard. The blue sky liberal is in their late 30s to late 40s, so elder millennial Gen X range. They're white, bearded, and almost exclusively men who think abandoning Twitter to start their own social media platform was a good idea. And maybe in theory it is, but the problem is they happen to be so humorless that they actually make the platform owned by the fascist centrists, the cooler one by default. Yes, Twitter is a dumpster fire that is now plagued with ads, AI, and Nazism, but I've yet to find a poster on Blue Sky with a personality. Maybe because they believe Astrobot is one of the literal best games of all time. Blue Sky libs score very low on fascism, which is good, but unfortunately they also score embarrassingly low on Riz. Be careful of Blue Sky libs because they might seem tolerant, but they're in bed with centrist opportunists like Jeff Keighley. Seriously, Astrobot over Metaphor Refantasio for Game of the Year? So Blue Sky libs are chill and not very fascist, but they are also somehow paradoxically insufferable and lack good taste. They also love Triple H's version of WWE, did I mention that? They also like to remind everyone how bad things are all the time. Typical lefty move, but they also love to say "we are so back" whenever their favorite content creator returns after 3 months of inactivity to drop their latest 7 out of 10 video. What about the Bernie bros, the disgruntled activists, the sock dems? Are they libtards? I'd like to put the social democrats between a libtard and a leftist. Fascism at a respectable 7, not showing off, not falling behind. I mean, Bernie is great and all, but I gotta call him out for his both sides, the Israel-Palestine conflict. Would his fascist tendencies be lesser if he decided one day to call what was happening a genocide instead of a war? Maybe, I don't know. Feeling a light 6 on the know-how for Bernie bros. They touch grass, but unfortunately they are so annoying that they ruin it for everyone else trying to enjoy the 3D Matrix world. This is why they are so proficient at canvassing. Well, they aren't, but they have a thick skin when it comes to rejection and doors getting slammed in their face. I admire the not give a fuckery, and it does take a lot of effort. These could also be the type of people who will make Free Palestine their entire personality, boring people to death with their unique story about how they've seen dead babies on their phone every day for the past 2 years because they can't hold down a job, and now they have way too much time on their hands for doom scrolling. Okay, so let's move on to the remaining 3 types of leftists: the anarchists, the tankies, and the postmodernists. Anarchists are suspicious of all top-down forms of state control, so they say away with the state, but with no actual solution outside of folk politics. These types love to make local their entire personality, and while I do find a lot of anarchist ideology impractical, I will say it has gotten a pretty unfair shake since its inception in the 19th century. Marxists, aka tankies, perform the heist of the century by claiming a lot of anarchism, but then putting their own state-controlled bureaucratic spin on things. Tankies are extremely annoying, and like liptarts such as Vosh, will never miss an opportunity to tell you how much smarter they are than you, but they do have a much more pragmatic map forward, I will say. Tankies will always defend the USSR and will avoid citing Stalin whenever possible because it is too convenient for their narrative, but they are right more often than they're wrong. Also, they stand for China, which I like. And to all the Trump supporters patiently waiting for your part of the video, one of the most right-leaning people on the planet is such a China stan that he and his family live in China. And that leaves us with the last of the leftists, what centrist opportunist Jordan Peterson calls the postmodernists or cultural Marxists. I'd like to update JP's labels and simply qualify the tankies as the cultural Marxists and the other ones as the postmodernists or POMOs. POMOs are people who read Marx but also read people like Foucault, the Frankfurt School, and of course Slavoj Žižek. But some postmodernists hate Žižek, so you could divide the postmodernists further by distinguishing between a Žižekian and an anti-Žižekian. An anti-Žižekian probably reads a ton of Deleuze and Nietzsche. They're basically Nick Land, but we'll get to him, Trump supporters. Postmodernists can be annoying as hell, especially if they're Lacanian-pilled and love to revel in obscurity, but some POMOs can be pretty chill. The biggest criticism I can level against the POMOs is that they spend all their time reading and no time actually touching grass, so they are real ivory tower types. The tanky/postmodernist divide can be seen as having occurred in 1968 when we saw the transfer of power from the old left to the new left. The old left was the disgruntled proletariat who had objectively bad working conditions, and the people who wrote the Marxist pamphlets could actually distill the concepts in a way that was pretty straightforward and coherent to all those unwashed, uneducated masses. The postmodernists or new left cannot do this. Their theory is riddled with jargon, meaning the middle/working class cannot stand them. Also, the postmodernists allegedly worked with the CIA. At least that's what the tankies say. Tankies love their conspiracy theories. I wouldn't be surprised if that one was true, though. You're on a late 6 in the fascism unless you're a Foucauldian, which if you are, bump your Zionism and fascism up to an 8. But also you get to level your Riz up to an 8 because Foucault was gay and experimented with different sex styles. Okay, so libertarians are basically Trump supporters now, but they're critical Trump supporters. Their daddy Joe Rogan has been quite vocal in his criticism of Trump after championing him in late 2024, probably because he was so butthurt that Kamala couldn't fit him into her schedule. Joe lives for the long-form content. An hour-long podcast ain't gonna cut it. But there seems to be 3 main types of conservatives now. The first one is the J.J. McCullough-tinged conservatism that his protege J-Reg has branded reactionary centrism. Reactionary centrists think you should be more grateful living in the allegedly most comfortable period in human history, and wow, I gotta say, I don't hate this take. Libtards and reactionary cons find themselves agreeing on a lot these days. Just make a few small adjustments and everything will be right as rain. And I will say, as someone who identifies as a postmodern leftist who doesn't do anything much other than play video games and read books I don't understand, sometimes I gotta pinch my arm and remind myself that my life could be so much worse. I'm still living in relative comfort. I can play video games in the middle of the afternoon on most days if I choose to. I'm not starving. Sure, prices are higher now, but that just means I got to be more conscious of what little dough I do have is going. Having less money to spend on pointless things is good for the soul. I don't know what else to say. Center-right libertarians are so dull, very much like the status quo centrist opportunists, but I do feel like their heart is in the right place, far less on the fascism scale. Then there are, of course, the Trump supporters, which, yeah, let's go ahead and throw Joe in there. RFK and JD Vance will put him in there, too. It's funny because these guys are Trumpers now, but at a different time, they were other things. RFK was an independent until he realized he didn't have enough talent to uphold his nepotism, so he had to tuck his tail between his legs and swear fealty to our great new dictator. Same with JD, who used to literally compare Trump to a Nazi. Typical libtard move. Again, be careful when it comes to libertarians and libtards because they hover dangerously close to centrist opportunism. Russell Brand used to be a socialist, but now he goes on and on about conspiracy theories. I guess the worst thing I can say about Trumpers, aside from the fascism, is that at least the white ones don't really bring anything new to the table ideologically. Where are the entertaining Alex Joneses and Steve Bannons of the party? Now it's just a bunch of boring nut jobs. They just consume Daily Wire and Fox News and then regurgitate that to anyone unfortunate enough to listen. The insanity and the inconsistency might have been novel at first, but it has become predictable in its incoherence to the point that you can pretty much get the main gist of what they're saying after a couple of sentences. But what's interesting to me about this second wave of Trump supporters is how many of them are now minorities. You can no longer say fascism is simply racist or misogynist because to do so would be to contradict and undermine the ideologies of many women, Hispanics, blacks, and various other peoples of color who now openly support the guy. I don't think it's as simple as blacks and Hispanics wanting to be white. I mean, no shit, who doesn't want to be white? I'm putting fascism at a 9.5 because, well, I mean, it's a slightly less schizophrenic dictator we got than the failed artist from all those decades ago. Hitler at least tried to be creative. Donald T is just a fat old man who knows how to say ridiculous things and was lucky enough to be born with money. So the fascism number is pretty alarming to me, and not just because I think it's morally a bit dubious to support the guy. Entertaining, sure, I get it. Trump is funny. I'd be lying if I said there weren't times watching his content with a shit-eating grin I'm trying hard to conceal, but can't. Ironically, the leftists are now the ones who seem to be all white. I'll take the L there. So let's end this video on the pro-AI, pro-singularity, right-wing accelerationists. We have theorist Nick Land to thank for this one. Nick Land was a leftist until he suffered a breakdown in the mid-90s after becoming disillusioned with the left's impotence and pivoting to someone who was vehemently pro-capitalist to the point that he wants it to overtake humanity. Accelerationists see artificial intelligence and capitalism as one and the same. To them, the future is already etched in stone. We just need to quicken the process. They see little need for their meat sack bodies. Just jack them into the singularity, instant gratification, everything all of the time. I'm a little more pessimistic about the singularity. Left accelerationists don't yearn to become one with the singularity, but they do believe in full-scale automation for places like fast food joints and Amazon warehouses could open up time energy for wage slaves who would prefer not working a job they hate. And, so they could start focusing on their passions. Maybe that's learning a musical instrument. Maybe it's developing video games. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's meditating. Who knows? It's almost like the more fascist things are, the less fun the culture is. And I'll be honest, it'd be nice if we could get more normies focusing on their passions and pet projects rather than slaving away at a job they hate so they can invest in a 401k that will probably be irrelevant in 10 years. RX or EX don't like this, though, because then that means UBI needs to become a thing. And speaking of UBI, I don't know what to do with this, but why was it that we only got stimulus checks when Trump was president? You think if Biden was in power in April of 2020, we would have seen those? When I see Trump doing his thing, I don't get mad at him. I get mad at libtards who make their entire personality berating him without realizing that they are definitely a big reason why a Donald Trump could even get elected in the first place. Think about it. What would Saturday Night Live and Jon Stewart and John Oliver have to talk about if Donald Trump wasn't so busy writing their comedy for them each week? They'd be miserable. They're comfortable in elitist lives now without meaning or purpose. This might surprise a few, but I'm giving Trumpers an 8.5 on the know-how scale, and that's because a lot of tradesmen are Trump supporters. In fact, one of the nurses that taught my wife how to properly breastfeed was a Trumper, a proud Trumper. I've heard online how it's usually the libs or the leftists bragging about their politics to your face, while the average Trump supporter is closeted in their shame. I was stuck with this nurse alone as my wife took her first post-pregnancy shower, leaving me alone with this broomer broad with a crooked smile. She was annoying in that way that an overly anxious talker was. I mean, there was this light bulb going out in the bathroom, and she's just going on and on about how it's going out, and she's stressing me out, and I'm already on like 45 minutes of sleep. But she was very helpful. Best nurse we had the whole week, and we had a lot of great nurses. I'm not joking. We made small talk to pass the time as I was learning how to hold and feed my daughter. She asked about my dogs. She asked what our daughter's name meant. When I explained to her that it was a Mexican name, she remarked that she had just recently returned from a trip to El Salvador. Now, El Salvador and Mexico have absolutely nothing to do with one another aside from the fact that they both rest south of the United States. But that didn't seem to stop this dear old lady from saying what she said next. So I'm putting their intellectual know-how at a 3 because a lot of Trumpers unfortunately don't have a keen grasp on reality. I get it, libs are annoying, but please read a book that wasn't written by Jordan Peterson. And this was the moment that confirmed what I suspected all along. The truth is, I never had a face-to-face conversation with a Trumper in the wild. You know, in the IRL meat space of the 3D Matrix tangible reality. Sure, I've interacted with trolls in comment sections who I swear felt less like I was arguing with a person and more like I was arguing with reactionary AI. But this was a real-life flesh and blood woman before me. She said, and I quote, "El Salvador is beautiful. And speaking of El Salvador,
We have a new president who's putting all the criminals in jail.
we have a new president who's putting all the criminals in jail. We have a new president who's putting all the criminals in jail. We have a new president who's putting all the criminals away there." I didn't know what to say next. Sweat poured down my already drenched back. It was 60 degrees in the room because hospitals like to keep their rooms cooled at a sub-zero temperature. Seriously, I love nurses and their know-how, but they're also at least a little bit insane. My body felt like it was on fire, so I did what every cowardly, sleep-deprived new father would do. I nodded and smiled, and then I changed the conversation. What? Oh, you would have said something? The woman was in charge of my kid for the day. What was I going to do? Best case scenario, give her a crash course on, no, Marxism is good actually, on 2 hours of sleep the whole week? If you get nothing out of this video, I guess my main takeaway would be that fascism is here and it is here to stay for quite a while. Even if we revert back to a Democrat in 2028 or hell, even a SocDem like Bernie or AOC, that does not mean fascism has been overcome and defeated. I'm looking at you, blue sky libs. Things are slightly less comfortable than they were when Obama was president or when we were all watching the war on terror unfold in the comfort of our own homes on our big screen TVs. Now we actually got to make conscious economic decisions, maybe sacrifice that next vacation or hold off on that overpriced organic smoothie so we can complain about it on TikTok. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I guess I remain hopeful because at least now people are beginning to look at themselves in the mirror and it ain't pretty. Maybe now people who don't agree will start having difficult conversations, or maybe we'll continue living in this period of peaceful non-coexistence with our neighbors. Maybe not the best case scenario, but if everyone just stayed inside and chilled out watching streamers in the news or new media / old media, yeah, that ain't great and that's very passive, but at least we're maintaining our boundaries and minding our business before making any rash, destructive decisions, at least any more destructive than what we're currently doing. If you feel like you can't contain your anger with trans people or women or people of color, maybe stay inside, read a book, watch a YouTuber who isn't affiliated with the Daily Wire or Russian big business. I don't know, maybe check out a content creator with good tastes instead of IGN recommends you or your algorithm. Switch up your algorithm. Seek out leftist takes. Seek out alt-right takes. It's not like this shit is going anywhere. Anything but centrist opportunist takes, for the love of God. Thanks for watching.